Okay. All right. I think we're live. Maybe. Maybe we're live. I do this every time. Welcome for you who are tuning in right away, and for those of you tuning in after the stream as well. Um, we have a good one today, a really good one. Um, First, I want to say that empathy and empaths are, an interesting way for us to identify with ourselves as we start to awaken to the sort of the heart. And we may already have been awakened to this state much younger. Um, and often this also inspires sort of our slumbering state, is like all of the pain of the world, really. Which, as empathic people or sensitive people, you could say, sensitive souls, which is more of our natural state, the more we open the heart, the more sensitive we become, generally. Uh, which we then need to learn to balance, which is what the stream's about, actually. It's about balancing and about learning about some of the metaphysics or the understandings of the energy or the subtle energy that's happening in energy transfers between two entities that are mingling with each other in some way, and how this sort of affects empathic people. Now, it affects everyone the same. The only real difference is that someone that is opened up more in the heart, and as well someone that's working on sacral and solar plexus initiations or lessening, is going to feel like more pulled into these things. They're going to feel more pulled in. And because they feel more pulled in, everything sort of can have this weight to it, and it can feel very crushing. It can feel very numbing as well, like almost like we need to detach from people, detach from the world. And that's an okay way to go about it. Like it, essentially, we maybe feel called to come into isolation and things like that, which is perfect. And so none of this, as with anything I ever do, none of this is about like shaming our empathic sensitivity. And it's not about shaming other people that are looking for empathy from us or compassion from us. It's really just about trying to notice the different layers of like reality, different layers of truth, and how empathy gets mixed up with ego things, and how that actually causes most of our discomfort as empaths. There's these sort of interactions we get into, and we don't really realize energetically what we're doing. We're all mystics and magicians, energy workers, light workers, whatever we want to call that. We are all doing that. Once our hearts open, we're bringing light to the environment somehow. And despite what it might seem like, even the light we try to offer in the 3D way or in the dualistic ways as empathy is still us trying to bring that light, still trying to bring the open heart. But part of the issue is the frequencies, the vibrations here, and the calling for consciousness and awareness to rise makes the lower forms of truth less satiating, less sustaining for us as well as for other people. Things stop resonating. They just sort of stop resonating. You'll notice this in your conversations with people, that sometimes like people that are great friends, there's nothing wrong with the person, but they just can't seem to be anything other than like afraid and scared. And you love them so much that you keep sort of trying to like help them with this. And that sort of ends up draining us. Part of these things are meant to notice this. And, I talked about this in one of the streams I did a couple months ago, talking about how this is changing for us as beings. We're all at different levels and layers of this. So wherever we're at, it's perfect as well. What we want to do is try to keep some of these things that I'm talking about today in mind. And I'm going to go through them all. It's not that much really, but then I'm going to go through that. And then if we have any Q&A, questions, comments, areas of concern around these things, because it's quite a subtle, nuanced little topic. Empathy seems to be empathy, but it's more like empathy has, just like every other expression of love has layers of truth to it, like layers of authenticity or layers of godliness to it. How much God is in it, essentially. The more God and truth is in it, the more high frequency or high vibrational it is. So what I'm going to get into first is just I think we can obviously see it appears that there are two primary waves of consciousness here. But what I'd like to say is there's actually three frequencies primarily driving our evolution right now. As human beings anyways, and our state here as a collective, also as individuals. And the collective is here and the individuals can be up here or they can be down here, but the collective is sort of the medium, what's the word, median, or the averaging of all of that, sort of. It's not mathematically accurate, but it's kind of like that. So the collective's also doing this. And so the more people are rising up into higher frequencies of consciousness and then maintaining that, the easier it is for the ones that are floating around in lower vibrational states to pop up into that. It's kind of like building this giant river up here in consciousness that's like sucking people up into it almost, creating a sort of reversal of the gravitational pull in a way that pulls us down into matter as spirit. It's the reversing of that, and so we start to move towards the higher pull. We'll notice the poles in the earth are probably shifting. Someone could let me know about that, but there's probably the poles shifting again. This is when the polarity is starting to change. We're starting to move out of the epoch we were in and moving into the age of Aquarius, where the ages have this like bleeding effect where it's kind of, it takes a period of years to change. And I'm not exactly sure what those years are, but I think they're laid out in the, I think we're in what they call the Kali Yuga right now. And I'm not sure if those things are entirely accurate, but I would say that certainly we're at the ending and beginning of a new epoch. And the epoch is the rising and resurrection of Christ, or what we could just call, if we don't like the word Christ, we could just call it 5D or 5D consciousness, which I call Christ consciousness, which doesn't have anything to do with religion, which I often say, but I just like to be clear. It's not about Christianity or religion. It's about the consciousness that Jesus Christ embodied when he did what he was doing. Humans then made a religion about that. And, all who seek God in whatever way is fabulous. Of course, there's distortion there. That's not about this. So we're not going to get into all that, but that's other talks for other days. But there's three layers, and we could essentially say that we are asleep at 3D or third dimensional consciousness. We're asleep in duality. Like we're running around doing stuff. It's not that we as the soul or the Christ in us is asleep. The Christ in us is wide awake, but our experience of that level of awareness is lower vibrational and in duality, right? Then we have the 4D space, which most people don't really talk about because it's 3D and 5D. The 4D space is the heart space where the being is experimenting and learning love. And in order for us to do the transition, we had to have both frequencies available so that we can come into this void space where we're learning what love is, the unconditional love of the Creator. We're learning what that means and how that is in us and in everything else, all other beings. We're learning that. And then we are moving into just God is, I am as God created me in the higher plane or the 5D. That would be home, heaven, the kingdom. We actually oscillate usually up and down, in and out of these. So we have moments that we're asleep, moments where we're wide awake. We know exactly who we are. And then moments in between where we're traversing, usually in 4D, we're traversing sorrows a lot. Like various sorrows in that status or that frequency of consciousness. The only reason I'm going so much into that is because it becomes really, really important when we're engaging with other people and they're seeming to need empathic type support, like an empath. They're looking for empathy in some way. So dualistic empathy is going to affirm that someone else has a problem. So actually, let me just read something, because I made this comment to somebody, and it was just it was one of those times where you just write something that just has a good amount of wisdom in it. So I wrote, empathy is formed by observing that another is in an ill-gotten state, or disease, or a state of lack of wholeness. Observing that a soul is divinely as perfect as it may be immediately now, regardless of its ostensible predicaments and emotionality, is observing outside the paradoxes of duality and the third dimensionality. This is what allows unconditional love to flow truly. Then, empathy is more of a genuine caring and loving attentiveness to what is in the moment between the forms of consciousness observing themselves and each other. To empathize with a problem, one must affirm a problem, whereas unconditional love affirms only the truth and the solution to any perceived problem. So what that means is that we tend to see empathy as like, oh, look at this poor being that we're observing, right? Like, they're hurt. Look at this poor being that's hurt, and I'm so sorry that's happened to you. Oh, that sounds absolutely horrible. Yeah, I feel you. I feel it, and we kind of draw ourselves into it. And what we don't usually recognize is that we're affirming a problem with them. We're essentially dragging ourselves energetically into this place that the ego's called for, which is a place of, look how hurt and broken I am. And then we agree with it. So we essentially help that person affirm for themselves their saddened state or down state. That can give a temporary boost to the ego, which helps them to feel sort of, yeah, I get it, like how bad it is for me. Or they may feel like they get it off their chest and feel a little bit better. But usually the one that's been talking with them takes that burden on, because a lot of these people, a lot of us are not like trained therapists. We're not necessarily sure what we're doing. And we're sort of taking on what they say, and actually we're affirming for ourselves that we have problems. And this is confusing, because we don't think we're doing that. But what we're doing when we're affirming a problem for another is that we're affirming that God has a problem. We're affirming that we have a problem, and we're not really looking at a solution necessarily. So there is certainly time to like give space to somebody and hear their feelings and be compassionate for them and hold space for that. But what we're going to feel called to do is usually to either start to step away from some of this or try to affirm the truth. The truth is that the problem that they're having is it's an indication of their feeling of lack of wholeness. And so we can hear their problem. We can understand that it's a being in a confused state, feeling that they're been hurt by the world, which we respect because we know how that feels. We understand it. We've felt hurt by the world as well, so many different ways. We've all experienced our own sorrows and pains and troubles, traumas, and other people's traumas remind us of our own, and we create this sort of cycling. And so really what we're just trying to notice is that these cyclings aren't necessarily helping the way we thought we'd be helping. They can be helping, right? So there's a purpose for everything. And really what we want to notice is how we feel about the interaction. Like, how does it all sit with us afterwards? Did we feel heard? Did we get off the phone with them or something? We kind of feel like, oh, that was a lot. Those types of things. Those types of things are indicating that we're giving our energy away to an illusion. We are not going to feel so sustained anymore off of recycled energy. I talked about this a couple months ago. But recycled energy or resourcing energy from other experiences or externalized experiences isn't going to feel great. And so then if we're doing that, energizing an external experience in a negative way, even if we are trying to aid them, we may end up feeling that not only did we not really do anything, but we also are now not feeling very great, like tired, maybe depressed even. It's hanging on us or something. Like we almost need to then compensate some way. We'll have to have a tea or like do something to try to normalize ourselves again. And because we don't necessarily attribute any of that state to the conversation that just happened, we end up kind of perpetuating this and going on with this because we care so much about people. So we want to try to mix, be in the world but not of it, the way Christ often talks about. Respect the illusion, but really honor the truth. Just respect the illusions here and we're in it, doing all this with people. And other people are at different levels of this awareness. And it's very, very not compassionate to tell someone who's really hurting about something that they're just in a story, right? That's not very compassionate to just deny their experience. So none of this is about denying their experience. It's about noticing the confusion of the experience, not telling them that they're confused necessarily. And I've made these mistakes. This is why I'm saying these things, because I've, in an effort to just try and help people, I've accidentally said, well, because I thought, well, if I just let them know that they don't have to be upset, then what's the problem? Like this ignorant, kind of innocent but ignorant approach, it doesn't work really. Like most people aren't going to really hear that, and they shouldn't really, honestly. Like they need to feel their feelings. And when I really reflected on why I'm doing it that way, it's because I didn't really want to feel what they're giving. I didn't really want to feel it. Because as an empath, I was sensitive, oversensitive, and I got tired of hearing about all these things and feeling all of these people's things, because I was sort of thinking what they're saying is like really real, if that makes sense. What they're talking about and all the power that's pushing against them in their life is so real, and then I'm like, this poor person, and my heart starts to go out to them, which is draining. Then we start to run away from that, which makes us seem cold. Or we just pull away completely and don't really talk to that many people. We start to compensate. And either we compensate with others in our relationships in unhealthy ways, like I was doing, denying a problem, which, at the end of the day, the things I was saying were true. Like I was speaking truly, but I wasn't allowing the heart to hear and nurture first. And so in another stream, I talked about letting the mother hear and nurture a little bit, but then letting the father speak. And our gender doesn't matter, but then letting the father or the masculine and the wisdom side speak a little bit as well. Trying to learn what the right flavor is for you, as well as feeling into what the Holy Spirit or Divine Mother or God or whatever, divinity, spirit feels like it's being advised to you to maybe go this way. So of Sean, I'm not trying to decide what to say to them. I'm not really trying to say, oh, I know the way to help them. Because instead what I'm saying is this divinely perfect being is in front of me and they're feeling a lot of things. And what is my role here? What's the appropriate role to serve them? That's really where the 5D empathy and compassion starts to come in, where we're not seeing a broken soul. We're seeing a confused soul that's having a nightmare, and we want them to wake up, but we have compassion for the nightmare as well. Like we remember being in our own nightmares, and we remember giving our power away to everything in our reality, and we remember that we're probably still doing it quite a lot to varying degrees. So we get it, right? That allows us to hear it without judgment or anything like that, without going, oh, this is wrong, they're talking falsity. Oh, the fear, they're talking about fear and I don't like it. That part of us needs to just basically be able to be like, it doesn't have power over me. It bothers us basically because we're like reminded of past traumas and past forgetfulness, and we're reminded of the part of ourselves that somewhat falls back asleep a little bit here and there. And these things like kind of bother us a bit to notice. Especially if we're placing ourselves up here and like we're wide awake, or something, and then we act a little odd and we get involved in things that we shouldn't, then the guilt is way higher usually. So it's kind of like that. Like, we know the truth, and the more rooted we are in our truth of who we are as our God self and divine self, or the light of light, these ideas that someone's broken don't make any sense anymore, really, which is perfect because now it allows you to hear them and generically almost understand, oh, this is very, my heart goes out to this individual for feeling this way. And we can give them the compassion, say, that sounds like it's really challenging for you. But then we can attempt to maybe make a bridge into a more expanded view. We're trying to bridge it. We're not trying to dismantle their illusion. We're not trying to crush their thoughts or dreams or beliefs or whatever. We're just trying to say, the truth of the matter is over this way, and we want to make a bridge through to that. If that feels like it's appropriate. It's not always appropriate to bother. Often, almost like very often, the proper response is no activity, but just lots of loving, unconditional appreciation and even affirmation and prayer silently towards them and their soul and spirit. Until we have some level of understanding of how to actually navigate these things in healthy ways, it's often kind of better for us to like just hold the space and not say too much. But it's through speaking that we learn that balance. So we don't want to just tongue tie ourselves either. And we want to walk out on that tightrope of speech to try to offer our wisdom if we feel called and feel like that's something that we can do. It all depends on our own missions and like kind of what we're feeling like doing. So again, any questions or any interesting things about empaths or problems empaths face that might relate to empathy or compassion? I guess an empath would define themselves primarily by their empathy. So anything about any of that, just drop it in the chat, and as soon as I'm done going through this, we'll chat more. So the third dimensionality or dualistic empathy affirms that there is a problem, and that's not sane, and it's not healthy either. But it has a time and place in not only our advancement and evolution, but we are sort of brought up kind of believing that that's how we help each other, is like we listen to each other's problems and we might offer solutions even. Like usually they're practical solutions, like, oh, you know what you should do? Go do this. And these advices that we often offer to people are like just more ego stuff for them to go and do. And at the end of it all, they're probably still going to like feel the same pretty much, because the root of the confusion is that they feel limited and not whole. It's not that they don't have the right job, or it's not that they didn't say the thing to their boss they're supposed to say, or their wife or husband, or those aren't the things. Those are symptoms of the lack of wholeness inside, feeling the lack of wholeness. So we don't solve the symptoms by using the same type of mind that created the problem to address them. We step outside of that and we ask for guidance and the Holy Spirit to help us, Spirit, Christ, divinity, whatever, to aid us in supporting and uplifting if we can. Reminding them of their divinity, reminding them of their perfection. But the ego doesn't really like that either. Like, part of the ego likes it, but part of the ego hates it. It's sort of a mixed bag. And when the ego is being confronted in a belief in fear, and it's saying, and you're saying that this fear is not real, the ego is going to get upset probably. It's going to try to stir them into a riled up state. Depending on how they perceive you in the relationship, they might lash out at you. If they see you as like a very wise person, they may just quietly be upset, but they'll probably hear you a bit and think about what you said. So it really depends on the relationship and context of everything. but essentially how they see you drastically influences how your words and what you offer them even lands. And so you have to sort of keep all of these weird things in mind to then try to make a decision, which is so much. It's too much. There's too much happening in these interactions for the mind to really totally keep track, which is why we go to spirit and we open ourselves up to just let it happen the way it's supposed to. And often it's just like quiet or even silent love, silent, loving prayer to affirm the soul's perfection. And actually, like when my children get hurt, like they stub their toe or like bang their knee or something, I just hold them and I'm just imagining how perfect they are. And honestly, like within moments, usually they stop crying. I don't think Sean has anything to do with that. And these pains are minor, they're not big things. But I do feel like the pain shuts off in them because they're held right against my heart. And we're just affirming with all of our might and power the perfection they are. And so they feel healed. They feel healed. So that pain, whatever pain it was, falls away because their perfection gets recognized by another entity, which uplifts them. So I always talk about trying to perceive the perfection in others, and that's wise because that's what heals them. However, when we're dealing with people talking, it is different. Like it's the same thing, but it doesn't really work the same to just hold them because the adult is in such a resistance to the safety of wholeness, and they're so feeling secure in the fear because it's home to them at that time. That's what they've created as home, that they're clinging to that. So even you affirming their perfection, it just seems like they just don't feel heard. They feel like you're not listening, right? So you have to hear them, receive what they're saying, offer them usually something so they feel and heard and understood, and then you come back with the 1-2 jab, right? I hear you, I get it, I'm with you, I understand, I've had similar experiences perhaps. However we can try to relate with them and understand them. And then, if it feels appropriate and they feel open, then we can try to bridge back to wholeness. We end up getting put in our friendships in literally like therapist roles. And we're not trained to be therapists. But the whole world is very sad right now, generally. Like there are people that have lots of happiness, and I'm not trying to make a bleak picture, but the world's going through a tough time. It's sort of like it's the world's dark night of the soul, really. The world's going through a really tough time, collectively and individually. And so everyone is leaning on each other for therapy, basically. And people don't know how to be therapists. And they shouldn't necessarily know how to be a therapist. Therapists are meant to be therapists, right? So part of our empathic struggle is that we put this burden on us to like help people that we don't actually properly understand how to help. And the best help we can do is noticing that the problem that they think they have is not real, but also still respecting that they feel deeply that there's a problem, still very much having the compassion for that human part that's understanding that, because that's actually how we bridge between that human self or the false identity self, ego self that thinks there's a problem, to the Christed or pure self that knows there is no problem. We can help build these bridges. That's one of the reasons that all the prophecies talk about building the bridge, and the bridge is through the fourth density. It's through the heart, you could say. Essentially bridging the heart through the throat so that divinity can see properly. That's kind of what we're doing. It's not that's what we're doing. But to bridge it, like the Blu-ray has to do a bit of playing around. It has to dance and play in the illusion. It has to express things and try to use tact and diplomacy and kindness to navigate into the bridging. And we can notice too, when we are seeking empathy from other people, we're seeking compassion and empathy. We want them to help us feel good. We might notice that it doesn't really work either, right? Because they'll tell us some stuff, and then we're like, yeah, okay, yeah, but that didn't really help me so much. I still kind of feel the same. It was nice to let it off my chest, maybe. It was nice to empty the cup, but overall, that lingering feeling of lack of wholeness is still kind of there. It's just not as pronounced right now, so we can not worry about it so much. And we don't want to really be affirming lack of wholeness that much. We're not going to feel that good about it at the end of the day. And wherever we're at's fine. Like if we're doing the more duality or third dimension empathy, which is sort of, oh, I hear you, I'm going to jump in and commiserate with you. And like, yeah, once I had my boss did this to me and that hurt me. And yeah, so I understand how you're feeling because look at what they did to you. And oh, what a terrible person they are. Like we're saying constantly all these things that are not true. We're lying all over the place. And part of us knows we're lying. Part of them knows we're lying. Part of them knows they're lying about the power that seems to be held, not over the truth of what seems to have occurred. Ostensibly, these things do occur. It's the power that we're giving to the emotions, the power that we're giving to the reality that we're observing. That is the crux of like what could be the issue. It's not an issue because we're the ones who choose and do it. We just do something differently, right? We do it differently now. Or we continue to have these types of experiences where it like doesn't align, doesn't feel great, and just gets kind of worse. So just as a way like to frame it, so 3D sort of framing of a problem might be something like my boss doesn't appreciate me, right? So maybe they passed up advancement opportunities for you, and like you just don't feel appreciated. Maybe they even say negative things about you to you. The next level of the heart openness is where we start to understand ourselves and love and remember ourselves, where we're awakening, because we're asleep, awakening, awake. When we're in that awakening stage and the understanding of love, it's more like I notice my boss has opinions about me and judgments about me, and I'm noticing that I seem to believe that these have some type of power over me. But I'm noticing also that this is due to a confused belief. I need to look into this and know myself about this so that I can accept myself about this and let go of this in forgiveness. That's where the 4D and the heart-based learning is all sort of happening. In 5D, it's more simple. It's much more simple and clear, but it's harder to just jump to this. We usually have to process and integrate some lessons and things first. But it's I am as God created me, and the world holds only the power over me which I give it. And the words that make this really easy from Jesus are when he's talking to Pilate and just says, you have no power over me other than that which I give you. Just affirming that the reality doesn't hold power over me because we are the reality. We are the reality. It's an illusion as well. So it couldn't have power. When we give our power to things, for example, when my first car got destroyed by somebody crashing into it, I was a little perturbed, right? I was like, oh my God, this is the worst. But after a little bit, and I had been practicing some stoicism back in those days, and I was like, oh, I guess, none of this actually truly matters to my happiness. It just is really inconvenient. And that bothers me. And it doesn't have to bother me. I could just handle the business and move on. I don't have to get all riled up. So that helped me a lot. But I hadn't yet found God, really. So I understood that I didn't have control over things and that it didn't really serve me to put my energy into worry. But I didn't understand that, like, God is and I am as God created me and any of that stuff. So I was doing the fourth density learning back then already. And I wasn't aware of these things back then. A lot of us have been on this awakening pathway that's so much deeper, and we probably had feelings like this, but Oh, it feels like I've kind of been doing it forever. Yeah. Yeah. Precisely. Right? Precisely. Um, and so there ends up being this place that we know that the situation holds no power over them. Therefore, their emotions and how they feel right now doesn't really hold power or sway us. However, we have compassion for it. And then if we know how to navigate properly with compassion and an open heart, an approach to wisdom, an approach back to wholeness, then we can try to offer it. But that's a subtle, nuanced approach that I tend to just recommend people try to start first just being okay with the person as they're expressing all their pain. Literally listening to everything they're saying, really feeling it, and also saying, isn't it interesting that this child of God thinks that they're less than whole? I wonder, God, if there's a good way for me to serve here. Trying to be humble about it. Like, I don't know of myself. So that's really the best way, I think, to try to approach it. And I make the mistake of trying to let Sean decide quite often with things. And it is a mistake. Well, not a mistake. It's an error in perception. We shouldn't be really jumping into painful, sorrowful, or foundational belief structures with people just on whim and whimsy. We can do things that are painful that didn't need to be as painful as they were, and somehow we'll notice that eventually, and we'll feel some of the pains that we've inadvertently caused by accident. We'll have some of the karma come back just in feeling, usually in realization. We'll go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize what I was doing in some of these situations, some of the ways I spoke to people and things like that. And all that feeling comes back to us, and we sort of feel what we gave them, in a way, is usually how it works. So it's all perfect, whatever we're doing. There's learning in all of it. Okay. So I just spoke for like 30 minutes, and now I'm going to check. Oh my gosh. So many chit chats. And it's mostly Riverbank Psycho. All right. So I'm going to try and get into the chat here. Riverbank Psycho says, this is so relevant to me and the wife because it's very frustrating and explains a lot. Love you, thank you, brother. Wake me up tonight so I can wake you up tomorrow. Rise, your faith has made you well. Love can build that bridge between your heart and mind. Yeah. Chad says, I've heard you describe the phenomenon before, but have you heard of the term dark empath? Yeah, I've heard of it. There's a couple different ways I understand it. Different ways I understand it. There's a dark empath is someone that, whether consciously or not consciously, is getting energized through others' energy expenditures, right? Like they can be covert or overt, and essentially these are like narcissistic type empathic people. Is probably the easiest way to describe it. But these labels are very boxy, right? It's very boxy. So I don't usually like them that much, but there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Vampiric or leeching type behavior. Most of it's unconscious, though. That's what I like to really try to highlight to people, is that the being that believes they're separate is unconscious. So when they're trying to take energy from you, and because they think they need it, like that whole thing is unconscious. They don't really know exactly what they're doing. So they both sort of exist, but at the same time, it's just an illusion of trickery of ego that this is even happening. What's actually happening is their ego thinks it's gaining energy, and then our ego says, we're giving them our energy, but really what's happening is sort of a vacuum or void of nothingness. It's just kind of consuming energy in one side, and then in the other side, it's saying, "Oh, look what you've gotten out of this. So good for you." that feeling that they get from that really dissipates really quickly. They have to then go seek it outside, just like a drug addict or something like that. Like they need it. They need it. They need to refill that cup because it's all made up. It's all made up. And we'll notice when we're getting sucked into that we're essentially dumping our energy into a void. It's into a vacuum of nothing. It's literally just taking our vital energy and just dumping it out. They're not getting it. They're not taking it. There's an illusion happening of this giving and takingness. There is energy transfer happening, but it's not like losing and gaining that way. What happens is we dump energy into fakeness, into unreality, and then we feel drained, and then we blame them, but we participated in it. So it's like this really interesting, wacky play happening between forms of consciousness where one form is like hell-bent on giving and the other form is hell-bent on taking. And both are kind of being unconscious about it. Because when we feel like they've taken us, we've essentially taken our power, we've essentially given them power. Because they can't take what we aren't giving. People can't take from our power, we can only give it. And when we give it all away, then we feel bad about that, and we notice a pattern in their behaviors, and we notice that this is like not healthy. So then we start to wonder, like, well, it seems like they're like nefarious. They could be, but that's a lot more rare, I would say. A lot more rare for someone to be conscious, like, I am going to go out and try and take their energy. And even if that's what they're doing, they're like not right. Like they don't get it. They don't get it because we have the infinite energy of the creator in us. We're not like taking and giving energy that way too much. We are transferring energy, melding energy with each other in a circle. Like when we interact, our auric fields intertwine and we cycle energy around like this with each other. And we get a feel for it all. And then depending on where our chakras are out of balance, we hold on to shit they gave us in the transfer that isn't good. Like, so we'll know we're being manipulated by some type of falsity, and we may put it on them to say they're the one that's false. But it's our confusion that's causing the feelings to start to come up. And that can be like annoying, you know, so it's, that can be annoying to be like, well, yeah, like we have to take responsibility for it. But yeah, there certainly are like dark or negatively oriented beings here. But in the human race, it's a very small percentage, very, very small percentage of beings here are actually like negatively oriented that way. Even the ones that seem like total psychopaths, like that are leading nations and stuff, often are not the way we would assume. They're not the heartless monsters often that we assume. They've just been brainwashed like other people, more or less. And they tend to try to do what they're told is the thing. So, you know, it's sort of like that. It's more just unconscious behavior that a dark empath is somebody that's feeling a lot, very sensitive to the environment, but then also is kind of using that to draw attention in like maybe histrionic or dramatic ways. Something like you might see type histrionic personality disorder type traits showing up in this person. And I'm not trying to pathologize it. I'm just trying to say that like dramatic over like almost everything is very dramatic. And that's when the ego's trying to get more and more and more. The more dramatic they make it, the more they feel like you'll be enticed into their illusion of suffering, right? And sometimes they're straight up just like making it up and they feel fine. You start to get a sense like they're like not even, like they may even be crying and you're like, this is not real. And I've worked with lots and lots and lots of clients, lots of people, and I've seen a lot of stuff from a lot of people, a lot of the wackiest stuff, and a lot of the more grounded stuff. I've seen all spectrums of things. from empaths, starseeds, wanderers, anybody on this ascension journey, religious folks, different walks of life, and I can sense authenticity in the emotion or not. So I can tell when someone's putting a show on, but a lot of times they're not even aware they're putting a show on as well. It's a strange thing to watch a grown person cry, but I can feel that the emotion that would usually cause the cry is not there. So what is going on? Like, it's a spooky thing. Actually, for me, it was a spooky thing the first time I saw it in a person. Thank you for that question, Chad. And also, it's so good to see you. So good to see you. Riverbank says, you're so on it tonight. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. It hurts sometimes. Yes, but a loving parent has to see the children fall and get hurt. So the children, exactly. Yeah, I let my children run around doing whatever they're doing. Hi, Jackie H. Hi. I let them run around, do whatever they're doing. And unless it's like overtly dangerous, I tend to just stay out of their way. And it may make me appear like a lazy parent, even to some people. If they were to watch me parent, I don't seem that involved. I'm watching, I'm there, I'm present, but I'm not really that involved in what they're doing unless they're wanting to play with me and I'm playing with them or whatever we're doing. I let them do the things that they want to do in their world and play with each other and build forts and jump around and climb stuff. And if they get hurt, they get hurt. I mean, it's fine. I have this trust that it's fine. It's fine. Unless I have this deep springing up in me of, oh my gosh, something's about to occur. Then I act. Then I'll go, no, this needs to not happen. So trying to balance all of that, and then taking that same approach to our friends and family relationships and like adults. It's all really the same thing. Children, adults, we're all just really children, right? So Riverbank says, yeah, it's so covert. They don't even know they're doing it. It's hard for them to see. Yeah, and actually we all do this a little bit, right? Like, it's really important we notice that there are times that we've been like wanting to exaggerate our sadness, let's say. Like, I've done this, I know, especially when I was a bit younger, but even into my 20s, I still did this, where I would exaggerate how sad I was because I just wanted some sympathy. I felt very not seen properly throughout my life. And so I wanted some sympathy, and I didn't seem to ever get it from people around me the way that I wanted it. And that's the point, is that confusion like never gets satiated properly. So it like keeps looking for it and trying more things. Sometimes it gets overtly like dramatic and outward and like flashy in its intrusiveness, and people get crazy and start doing crazy stuff. I don't like the word crazy, but I just mean really bizarre outward behaviors, right? So we all do this sometimes. And so that's how, for me anyways, that's how I found compassion for it. Like, I remember being pretty sad and then being like, well, I'm so sad. I'm like, help me. Right? Like, I remember being that person at a time. And even not that long ago, having desires to portray that a little and noticing that and then stopping it, like healing that part of me, right? So I recall these things, and that helps me to remember that the majority of this stuff is like just unconscious and confused. And really, another thing I want to talk about is when we're not, a lot of times we get targeted. When we're trying to help, we try to help the best we can, and we don't say the right thing. And then they come at us with how we weren't good enough for that. Don't listen to that stuff, guys. That's abusive. Despite what it might seem like, that's abusive. For them to come to you for aid, right? To deliver to you their problem, and then you, in your honest, authentic love, genuine compassion, just try to help, and then they just shit on your help. That is not someone that is respecting you. It's someone that's using you for that, in that moment at least. So if this is a pattern, I'm not saying if they do it one time, you just all bounce, but it's a patterned behavior. like, it means it should be addressed. We should speak to them about this and say, this behavior is continuing. And like, if you don't want my help the way that I keep offering it and try, like, I'm trying to help you in a way that's good for you. And if you don't like that, then like, don't come to me for help. Go talk to someone else, right? Like, why are you even approaching me? Because clearly I don't know how to help you, right? I don't know how to help you. So why are you coming to me and setting me up for this failure so you can blame me for your feelings, is basically what they're doing. Oh, now that he didn't help me or she didn't help me, now it's their fault. I could put it on them, this whole thing now, and transfer all of that blame onto you. They're using you essentially as a scapegoat, or they might be. And we don't necessarily notice that right away because we just feel bad that we didn't help, because we're sensitive and we want to help. And oh, I tried really hard to help. And then we feel bad and guilty that we helped poorly. We didn't help poorly. They just didn't want our help. They didn't like our help. That's their thing. It has nothing to, as long as we were authentic and our intentions were pure, then there's nothing for us to be upset about or worried about, you know, with any of that. We don't need to listen to that type of stuff. Unless they're right. Unless they're saying things and they're like, you could have tried this or that, and they're correct, and what they said is true. Like, if you led with cold wisdom, and they're like, you could have like heard me with some love first. Yeah, that's true. Maybe you could have, right? So we want to be nuanced. We don't want to set hard, fast rules about these things. We want to be in the flow of the moment, noticing patterns, but not holding to them either, because everyone can change in a moment. You can have a conversation like, you can have, how do I say this? You can have these moments with a person and then bring them up to discuss them in a sane, controlled way and say, listen, like, I love you. I love everything about you. But when I try to help you with your emotional things that you come to me with, you end up more often than not blaming me for the situation, or blaming me for not being able to support you the way you want. Perhaps you should go to someone that you're more comfortable with supporting you. Most likely they don't have anyone. Most likely they don't have anyone that will support them that way. They probably don't have anyone that will just take on their blame also. Sometimes empathic souls get so humble and so passive and peaceful, they'd rather just let the other person blame them. And even I'm like that. Like, I let them blame me, and I often won't even say anything. Yeah, blame me if you want, whatever. Like, I just don't care. But I'm at that point now. It's a little different for me now. But it was for a time, it was a problem because I wasn't setting any boundaries. So people were just repeating certain types of things until I just set my foot down and just stomped the boundaries into place. And then I just sort of said things like, these types of things are not happening in this relationship anymore. That's it. So, I'm not going to just walk away from the relationship. But when I'm being blamed for things that are just of your mind, like things you're making up in your mind and you're blaming them on me, no, that's not going to happen. So it's a tightrope. But there's also the side of like taking where like I said, it doesn't affect me. So I'm more at that place where it doesn't affect me that much anymore. Usually. It does sometimes, but usually it doesn't affect me that much. So if they want to blame me for some stuff they're making up, to me, it's just like they're blaming me for stuff they're making. It's meaningless almost, most of the time. This is harder when it's my children. Like my son, I had to get a little stern with him to get him to try to go to school. To try to get him to go to school, he didn't want to go. I had to get stern and like, I don't like that. And then he got upset because I got stern, and he's 11. It's, And then I feel really bad that he's upset with me for getting stern, but I did the right thing. I did the right thing at that time, I feel. So we notice that our attachment to the person and their opinion of us really affects our state of being. In that case, for me with my son. If it was like someone else, a friend of mine or something that was projecting a bunch of stuff on me, and also my son did have a reason to be upset because I was stern. He doesn't like daddy being stern. Stern daddy is a kind of, ugh, I don't like that, right? So of course he doesn't really like it. Jackie H says, if I'm feeling gloom and sadness lately, could that, yeah. Could that be the collective? Yeah, it is the collective, very much. It's also individual things. So the collective's always signaling individual stuff. It's really, really interesting this way. We can't avoid it. That's the best part of it. Even the sages and the mystics that go that mystic path in isolation, asceticism, they separate and walk into a cave in the mountain. They still experience the pains and sorrows of the world. The consciousness is like a energetic bubbling that's just over everything. You can't like escape it. So even if you isolate and like don't talk to anyone, you're still going to feel the world. And the vibrations as it's rising causes trauma to rise, which causes the weight of sorrow to build. And if we are having challenge with the sweetness of sorrow, like if we can't notice that sorrow is love, it's love that we're judging as a problem, basically, is what our sorrow is. And that's okay. That's what it is. We will go through this. I want to say as well, I've been having multiple days in a row of very anxious, but not satisfied feeling. Not at all satisfied, and very sad and oppressed and shut down. But I try not to let those feelings actually influence what I'm doing or being. But I feel them. I feel them a lot. Feel them a lot. Feel them a lot. And what my recommendation is like, what is this saying about me? Don't worry so much about like where is it coming from and stuff. Because it's always coming from an illusion. It's always an illusion of some kind that's starting it. So it doesn't really matter what started the feeling. The feeling's here now. So it can be interesting to explore where it came from. And that's what I do. So that's why we talk about this and teach it here. But for most of us that are just trying to kind of balance and heal and feel good, get to a place of peace so that we can feel like we can help other people in a place of peace, from a place of peace, and expand ourselves into who we are more truly. Noticing what does this feeling say about me now? Noticing as well, why do I think it's a problem? Also. So for me, I'll just say like my planetary alignments or my zodiac, the first 5 planets, which indicate essentially the personality of the human personality and how it experiences the world. At least that's how I frame it. They're all water for me, except for my Mars, which is Sagittarius and fire, right? So I have that strong masculine doing, kind of rushing forward without hesitation. But the rest of me is just submerged in the ocean of emotion, right? Cancer and Pisces everywhere, basically. It's Pisces sun, Pisces moon, or Pisces sun, Cancer moon, Pisces Mercury, Pisces Venus, and Sagittarius Mars. So I have this like emotion, passionate fury. And it's sort of like that, this cycle for me, is I feel all the emotion of the world almost all the time. And it's overwhelming. The way to resolve that is to realize that that isn't an issue. Like that's how we're built. We're built to feel that. If we're very empathic, sensitive that way. I'm not as sensitive when it's like one-on-one and stuff. I'm not quite as sensitive there. But in the world, like I feel the world's weight for sure, for sure. Chad says, a lot of feelings come from chemical balance in our bodies. Your walk-in is dealing with things that come from the physical vessel. I think spirit can heal the physical, but it's not instant. Yeah, you said a lot of interesting things there. Thank you, Chad. I love that. I'm so glad you're here. You always have great things to say. You're right. The feeling, emotionality is of the mind. So feeling is divine. Feeling in purity is just love. But when feeling becomes emotional, it's distorted into mind, which believes it's the body. So just as you said, if there's chemical balance in the body, imbalance, whatever, that can seem to influence the emotional state. But in truth, what's happening is the personality is anchored into the illusion. It's anchored into the illusion that the physicality affects the spirit, when it's sort of the other way. Chemical imbalance, like even physicians are saying now, like they used to talk about depression being chemical imbalances and stuff. There are certainly hormonal imbalances. What they're talking about, and they don't realize this, is that there's glands, the pituitary gland, and then there's also a gland at the very base of your spine. It's the gland that you'll feel, they don't talk about it very much, but if you hit your tailbone, that gland at the very base of the spine, the kundalini, that's like one of the most important glands you have. So the glands and the imbalances in the glands are actually representative of imbalances in the chakra systems that flow through. And if you look at the placement of all the glands in the body, and then notice that all of the secretions and formulations that happen in the body are a mirror of the energetic distortions that one holds. The chemicals that seem to be out of balance in the body are mirrored aspects of self. So the soul is out of whack, or the mind-body-spirit complex is out of whack, which produces observable chemical imbalance. And then you said something really interesting. You said, I think spirit can heal the physical, but it's not instant. Spirit can heal the physical, and it is potentially instantaneous, potentially instant, because time doesn't exist. And the Newtonian paradigms of physics are a illusion of a boxed illusion, a Christed being, a being that has remembered itself as Christ, a Jesus or Buddha type. You know, it was said that the trees themselves would bend to make sure Buddha had shade. The trees around would just bend to make sure Buddha had shade. Jesus would walk on water and things. These weren't like fairy tales. These were beings doing this. Yogis do these things. A really good modern example of like just this wacky stuff that just blows away any sense of physical reality is Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. So the body gets affected by the distortions in the spirit, or not in the spirit, but in the soul's learning, the soul's imprinting, and the chakra balances and the distortions in the lower three chakras, primarily, which then influence, like you said, emotional state and all these other things. So it's like this back and forth mirroring happening between the spirit or the soul, and there's multiple layers even to that, right? So you could say the human self, the ego self, is trying to mold itself through the help of spirit and the soul into an aligned personality. And then the soul is like learning its own things about its archetypes and how it wants to show up. The higher self is learning how to teach souls, and then God is learning of itself. And that's all happening like in a cycle. So there's essentially a place where the illusion seems to inform our state, where like our diet, for example, seems like I just eat 20 cheeseburgers and I'll feel like shit, right? But the only reason I ate 20 cheeseburgers and feel like shit is because my vibration was in alignment with feeling like shit. And so then I drew to me catalyst and stimuli to bring about the shitty feeling. If that makes sense? It wasn't that I ate a shitty diet and then suffered the consequence. Because remember that time is not real. There is no cause and effect that way. There is no consequence to it. The vibration attracts the whatever catalyst to inform the being of an experience. And as the being recognizes that there is no other outside anything, there's nothing out here, this is all an illusion, then it doesn't anymore matter what they eat, ingest, what they do. There's no more tie-in to this. One of the really good examples of this is Rasputin, where he essentially, they kept trying to poison him with, there's a really potent cyanide. With cyanide, like people don't survive cyanide poisoning, generally, especially back then. This was a magician, and a right hand or left hand path adept. So service to self, negative path magician. Very focused on empowering the self in negativity and service to self. He basically became aware of his creator status and then was able to consume poison without it affecting him. Lots of documentation about it too. Lots of like writing about all the attempts to kill him. Eventually, I think they threw him in a river and I think it was ice and stuff, but eventually they were able to kill him. But a being that is self-realized fully to that mastery state, is not affected by time and could perhaps even grow a limb. You know, that type of thing. There's been lots of comments. I'm gonna try and catch up. Thank you guys for joining me. You guys are amazing. I love you guys. If it weren't for you guys, I wouldn't even be able to do, I don't know what I would do. Chemicals aren't really real, right? Yeah, that's what Riverbank Psycho says. Yeah, they're not real. Like none of this is real. So it doesn't have power over us unless we give it power over us. So it's real for us, and it's so subconscious that like it seems insane to say that I could just. So I want to be very clear. I'm not saying we should go drink poison because we think we're God. You'll die. So don't do that. What I'm saying is a self-realized, fully masterful being would not be affected by these things, and also can make the body vibrate at the speed of light. When the body vibrates at the speed of light, but still seems to maintain its physicality, it can also be massless, right? It's massless now. So it can walk along water without surface tension, or seem to float along the ground without getting dirt on its sandals, for example. These are normal at that state of consciousness, which is where we're all moving to, literally. We're all moving to this at different stages. And so it's a weird thought. So it affects us and we have imbalance, and that affects our emotional state. Or does our emotional state and beliefs affect our imbalance? Right? It's our beliefs, really, of the mind, subconscious and conscious, that drive all of it. The belief that we're separate from God and that this world isn't real is really what does it all. And it's a really deep belief, deep, challenging one. Okay, so Jackie says, I've recently been afraid of dying, even though I know my soul goes on. Yeah, we usually experience that in various ways. Death is basically the anchor of time itself. And because of the way Saturn's been moving on Uranus, the illusion of time for almost anyone over 30, it's not going to anchor in so well. And time is the death keeper. time is what forces death to be. So as that fades away, we start to question death. We get existential almost automatically without necessarily being inspired in any way. Just comes about because the energies in the cosmos are pouring in with these lessening plans. So you can imagine we're not just collective, but planetary lessons are all happening, right? Sarah says, I've noticed in my journey I feel less and less empathic and feeling more of just myself, sort of sealed in. Yes. If I do feel something come up, I will use essential oils for herbal supplements to help the body area being affected. Before the Lion's Gate, my chest had immense pressure and I felt like it was going to explode. I felt irritable. I realized it was from a past life where I died of congenital heart failure, used hawthorn. Yeah. Actually, I want to show you guys something. So, during the Lion's Gate and some of the solar flares not too long after that, I had the same kind of thing that you were talking about, Sarah, where I had this like, I had an immense pressure in my heart actually, and it exploded. I was doing a ceremony. I was walking around in a circle going, hey, like trying to explode this energy out of my heart is what I was doing. And I don't even know what I was doing. I don't know what the ceremony was. It wasn't, I was just letting spirit guide the frame. So it was very unconscious that way. I wasn't like trying to do anything specific. And I felt this like release and this power explosive out of my heart. And then this happened. This was like a triangle. I hope you can see it. It was a triangle that was sitting right here on my heart on this necklace that just like exploded. And this is obsidian. And it just exploded. And as I didn't even notice that it happened. It was one of those kind of weird miracles that we experience where it was almost like the prison my heart was in evaporated. And I no longer felt any reprehensiveness about speaking my truth, nor did I feel tied into anything anyone's doing. Like suddenly I just felt free. And it was that weird necklace exploding that like helped me like, whoa, like all that release. I don't even know how the necklace exploded. Like I wasn't, how do you break that? Like I didn't do anything to break that, you know? And it's not, you know, so I keep it as a reminder. And actually it looks sort of like a rune, right? A Norse rune, sort of like a, I don't know. But anyways, I've had a lot of those types of really wacky experiences where just kind of insane things that just don't really make sense in the physical world happen. And you're like, it doesn't make sense for that to break that way. Like it doesn't make any sense. So what was released? What happened? I don't know. I really don't know. And it's these really magical, weird things that help me like reaffirm that at least something happened that day. And it was around that Lion's Gate time. And I want to say too that various oils, especially oils, like I have a whole case of oils here. I'm putting crosses on my third eye all the time of patchouli or myrrh or frankincense or sage. Like I'm always putting crosses here. Right on the third eye in different ways, or I'm putting on my wrists different sandalwood or different essential oils, really. My favorites being frankincense, sage, myrrh, and a few other ones. Sandalwood I like a lot as well. But these things affect us too, right? Like there's a mirroring that happens back and forth. However, there comes a place where it's the ritual of it, right? It's the ritual of it. If you were told that it was like sage and you did the thing, whatever your thing is, mine's the cross on the eye, because I want the eye to see the Christ. I want the eye to see true. The eye can... I'm not sure if it's the eye that doesn't see true, but I don't think this eye cannot see true. But I feel better when I Christ the eye that way. And I just think, let thine eye be single. Let thine eye be single. Let me see unity. Let me see love. And I do that. But if we had any other type of like oil and I was told it was sage, then I'm going to basically presume it's sage, and it's going to make the same effect sage would have, because the sage itself is an illusion. It's all sort of, medical terminology would be like placebo. It's all placebo. Like everything's of the mind that way in the illusion. So Sarah says, yes, Hawthorne's excellent for the heart. Yeah, Hawthorne is a good idea. I should check that out. Chad says, I think time is ultimately not linear and doesn't depend on a planet revolving around a star. Yeah, literally there isn't a planet, right? In literal truth, the planet itself and sun are not things, really. They're aspects of the illusion birthed in from consciousness. We call it the Big Bang, but it's it seems to take a really long time for the bang to start, consciousness and solar systems, galaxies, but then it all comes back in and crushes in on itself into a black hole, and unifies again and does that again. And it's doing that all the time. But it's always illusion into the void, and then illusion back into the all. And we see the void represented in all the space, right? It's all just sort of thoughts of the one mind to understand itself in such an innocent, curious... God as I have seen God is literally just the innocence of a soul that's like gazing at a rainbow, just like, oh. That's the best way I could describe God. Is like when someone's just so enthralled by something. No particular reason, it's just so beautiful and loving. Anyone, a child at a butterfly, or a man at his daughter, even. Just so enthralled by the beauty and love in that moment. That's God. That's the closest thing that I can illustrate as God. And so it's all thoughts of God. Even the planets and even these physical dimensions that science then creates sort of like narratives around to explain it to itself. It's essentially, you can see science as sort of like the mind without God. Like, let's not bring the creator into it. Keep in mind too, I came from IT background. I'm analytical, scientific in nature. I was anyway. But science in general is like, put God out of it and let's just try and understand it with our limited monkey minds. It's, it's not, it doesn't make any sense. They're not going to understand anything. They're just going to make up shit. And that's what they do. And it's okay. What we're going to see is a melding of science and spirituality, as well as psychology and spirituality. We're not going to have separation between God and other stuff. God is going to come into everything, or the entire civilization will die. It's one or the other. That might sound harsh or shitty, but it's not. It's like that's what has to happen. The ego can't sustain this fear-based mechanism in this vibration. It isn't possible. So it will either scream enough to cause humanity to destroy itself, or people will open to love, and it will stop. It's one or the other, really. I'm talking long stretches of time. I'm not talking right away. I just mean there's already like the Prime Minister of Britain or something. I have no idea who these people are, but one of those people was like, They were like, if you were forced to push the button to start a nuclear war, would you push the button? And knowing that it would end the world. That's how they phrased the question, was like, knowing this would mean the end of civilization as we know it. Would you push the button? And she's like, yeah, I mean, I do my duty, right? And the guy's like, you know, but then the audience is like, yeah, oh yeah, destroy everything. Oh yeah. Like the ego is insane, right? So luckily there's enough sane people here to notice that. Like they handpick the insane people in the crowd to celebrate that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a sign, clap, 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 clap. Yeah, power, atomic power, nuclear power. You know, it's just it's a stunt, a power stunt, right? But it's meant to look diplomatic. It's just meant to say, hey, I'll push the button. But they won't, because they're too afraid of dying. So they probably won't push the button. So at the end of the day, it's this really weird place. It's funny that we're into all these topics. We're talking about like empathy, but you know, like how much lack of empathy can you have to like destroy the world over like a country's disagreement? Was it like what? It's weird. So Chad says, but it's still real because you can't have movement without time. You can't speak a word or move an inch without time. In the way that humans understand reality, yes. Without time, there's no experience to speak about. However, time is a dimension of limitation that's kind of boxed like this. And stepping outside of time, there's a whole other paradigm of being that just can't be conceived of by the rational mind. So, and so don't try to understand what timelessness would mean, because we can't. Just recognize that there is a space outside of time that is just as vast in experience, but not at all comprehensible to the rational mind. Like, for example, just the idea that, like, I'm sure many of us work with Archangel Michael, right? For example, Archangel Michael being a frequency or messenger of the Creator, right? And a frequency of truth. But when we're working with Archangel Michael, we know probably that he's probably working with thousands or millions of other people at the same time. Right? And we want to maybe attribute that to his like power. But that's certainly part of it. But more, it's that he's working from a place where time isn't. So the infinite energy that he is can establish itself on any plane that he perceives. And so when we're outside of time, we can look into time. If that makes sense, we can move into time. So we go out of time and then we move into time to do what we need to do as souls or angelic beings, light beings. That's more what they're doing. And even in our human experience, we do the same thing. You'll notice, like, when you're in a flow state, you like, where did time go? What happened with time? It didn't exist, right? You were drawing, or you were working, or you were reading, or whatever it was. Next thing you know, a couple hours have gone by. And like, where did that go? You don't remember the hours. But other parts of your life, you do remember the hours, right? There's lots going on. Because the ego is the part of us that's like into time. The ego is the part that really anchors us into the time. And there's a large part of our ego is like subconscious. So it's like there's both happening. time potentiates experience at the human level, space-time, or the opposite of what we experience as time, precipitates experience at the spirit level, or the level of the light being. And we don't have concepts to explain what that looks like. So we want to say that time is like a thing, but it's truly not. And the best way to like really get that is probably reading through The Power of Now a few times. And I say a few times purposely because like reading through it one time, the first time I read that book, I was like, I listened to the whole thing on audiobook. I'm like, this is nonsense. I have no idea what this guy's saying. He is crazy. This guy's crazy. But I had been recommended it by so many brilliant people in my life that I was like, if these brilliant people agree with this weirdo, what am I not getting? I was so obsessed with being correct. Like I wanted to go back to these people and be like, no, he's an idiot. Here's why. Like I was trying to prove Eckhart Tolle is an idiot. Basically, that was why I read the book twice or 3 times. This was years before my awakening, but our ego actually is this is another good point. I've said this a couple times, but it's fun to remind ourselves. Our ego is what inspires it to die. Our ego is what puts itself out of work by continually pressuring us into these situations. Like by trying to prove Eckhart wrong, I showed myself that he was correct. And then I found meditation. I had already found meditation, but I found more what he meant by the moment and all of these different things. All right, so let's see what else is going on. Tear the walls down, walls around your heart. Oh, hi, Debbie. Hi, I'm so sorry I didn't see you. God is love, that's right. Sarah says, wow, about the necklace and extra interesting, it's a triangle. I once had a vision of a fractal collapsing triangle when I was in a dark night and leaving a long relationship. Yeah, like the downward triangle, like facing down, represents the physical illusion. That's why I wore this, right? So it was a downward triangle, and it represented the physical illusion, and what it represented to me was the darkness in me. And I would wear it as a sort of symbol to me to remind myself that I'm in a frame, that I'm like here in a frame. And it was sort of like, and then the upper triangle, sorry, I should say, the upper triangle are the top 3 chakras and the bottom 3 chakras, right? And then they go through the gateway or the heart. The heart might be seen as like a line. It's like the block. Until this opens, the being can't free itself. Excuse me. It can't free itself from the prison it's made in the lower 3 chakras, represented by the lower triangle. So yeah, when it exploded like that, it was sort of like, I'm free. But I felt how free I was, and then, like hours later, I didn't even notice because it's just a necklace, right? So I didn't even notice that it broke. And like, just think of how I could even break that. Yeah, like I was wearing it the whole time. Like how would it even break? Was I smashing my chest on something? I wasn't, right? I don't know what happened. It was just broken suddenly. I didn't feel it break. I looked at it and it was gone. It was broken. And I've had a lot of experiences like that. Riverbank says, we're all just a thought. We're all just thought. Yeah. Sarah says, interesting. I tend to use just a few oils, mainly rose, lavender, cedar, or vetiver, or for either clearing or planting energies, mostly for the subtle bodies. I find, yeah. All of it is amazing. All of it's amazing. I use them for all different ways, all different reasons. Same thing. Hi, Sabrine. Sarah says, as far as empathy goes, I strive to not be an empath. I just want to clean up my side of the street. Yes. Take care of my own microcosm. I can help others better when I'm not drowning with them. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Thank you. That's such a good way to say it. We don't need to dive in like without a floating device into their river or ocean of sorrow and then try to like scramble to save them from drowning with them. We can just throw out like a Jacob's ladder. I hope somebody gets that reference, but we throw out Jacob's ladder and we say, "Hey, come back on the boat. Come back up here. Because what you're doing down there, like, you don't need to do that. You don't have to do that." And Sarah mentioned earlier, like, feeling more inside ourselves. It's because we're more energy's in. It's inwards. It's ours. We're not giving it to illusions. We're not giving it to other people. Part of us thinks that we're supposed to give our energy away to people, but that's not like really a thing. Even it's not really even a thing. We don't have energy to give to people. They have their energy, we have our energy. It's all the same consciousness energy. It doesn't quite work like that. Not quite. It's confusing though. And not to say I'm not compassionate. Yeah, exactly. It's not about we're not compassionate. We recognize and recall all of it. That's why we notice we don't really want to do that again. No, that's not good. That's not true. It's not correct. Not, if I dive in to like tumbling waters in a unsafe sea, maybe I get hurt in there. Maybe things happen, right? So maybe I don't jump in, I just try to aid from my safe space. That sounds maybe like it's wimpy, but that's the place, like Sarah said, where you can actually help because you're centered. You get yourself, you know yourself, so you can properly help them remember themselves. E says, hopefully not too late to the starseeds conversation yesterday, but I believe we expand our consciousness different and new archetypes are revealed and created. I think one of these is starseeds. Show. Oh shit, I was looking up and trying to learn about Jacob's ladder just last week. Amazing, E. It's funny, you pop in always at these times where we're like, and we have these synchronicities. It's perfect. Jacob's ladder is sort of like the ladder we're climbing to reach our ascension, right? It's sort of like an illusion. But at the same time, it's not, because we're having pain and we're having trouble. So it's this interesting thought to work through it. This is probably a topic for another stream, but really what life is, the purpose of life is so simple. It's 2 words. This is literally the only purpose to existence, life here at all, is know thyself. It's been said for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years, way before Jesus, back into the Egyptians in the Book of the Dead, and it's been that there's nothing else to know but thyself. When we recognize that really truly deeply, then we're not necessarily swayed when we see ourself in others who's hurting. We see the pretend self that's hurting in another person. And we know that it's like kind of a pretend thing happening. So there's not really anything to get upset about, because we know that part of ourself and we still have compassion for it. We know what that felt like. But we know it and we've accepted it and forgave it. So it's not a problem anymore. And that's how we can know we've done really good with our healing, because other people's problems don't hurt us. They don't feel hurtful. And as E said, when we expand our consciousness, different and new archetypes are revealed and created. Yeah, we're creating ourselves into our future selves that we don't yet comprehend. So we talk about star seeds and we talk about like living in the stars, and yeah, like that's where we're from. Some of us, we're all from a star. We all are a star, literally. We're either from our sun, the logos here, or we might be from a different sun. But we're all from a star. And we remember various parts, various things. The further the star is away from this star, the weirder the archetypes as well, which is interesting. The further away from soul or sun, our sun, we get, the more weird things get, until eventually it gets to a place that we cannot even talk about it. There's not words to talk about it. Andromeda is a place like that. I can try to say that my memories of Andromeda are like a fluid nightscape dream, starry night, ocean of moving. That's it. It doesn't make any sense at all to the rational mind. Even my visions of it are not right. I just remember enough to say that weirdness about it. So it's exactly like E says, the archetypes get imprinted into like the soul based on the trajectory the soul decided to take and what parts that it wanted to really interplay with. Many of the souls here now know they're the Christ. They already know that. Like, they're already well aware. This is why you step into like spaces of like, I am God. I am all of this. It's obvious. That's why you can do that if you have those experiences. And if you don't, it doesn't mean you can't, because you are the same. But you have those experiences because the soul naturally knows that. So you're not like as restricted as a newer soul or a less experienced soul that called us here as wandering souls. Like, there's a reason that some of us just get it more. Like, there's a reason I'm talking about this and others aren't necessarily. If that makes sense. Like, there's a reason that I get it to a place that can help other people that are starting to remember along. It's not about hierarchy or teacher-student relationship. It's more, even as these all things fly out of my face, I'm learning of myself through all of this. So it's this cycling of knowingness and learning and reminding each other of our perfection. So I'm really trying to help people notice that when we remind each other of our perfection and our beautifulness and our love and our joys, that's when we're generally going to feel good. And when we do other things, we're going to feel not as good. So if we have to do the other things, we have to be compassionate. And yes, I understand that, your boss did this thing or your husband is abusive. It's challenging. But also it's freeing. It's these exact things they're going through that will lead them to their enlightenment. It's these exact traumas that will eventually highlight the effulgent truth and life and love of what they are, that will embrace their whole being, and everything that they thought was so wrong will just be, I just had this crazy dream, guys. I had this dream where there were like other beings, and like one of them like hit me, and it was like hurtful. And I know you guys can't understand. I know you can't understand. But listen, like, there was this place, and like people would throw spears at each other and fight, and like there were like just organizations trying to control each other. It was nuts, guys. It was nuts. Like, that's more the self-realized state doesn't see that stuff as even real anymore. Like, it's just stuff that people say. Like, it's just words or mind stuff. if that makes sense. And so even as we realize that, we then get very uncomfortable because we're doing both. We're here. We're still like here. We're not meant to like just pretend that we're not here. We're still here. You know, and the pains of our past are what drive us inward to see and discover what we truly are, which is stronger than the pain, right? And Jackie just said trauma led me to the truth. Trauma always leads to the truth. There is no trauma, truly. But it does feel like there is. So it's okay to recognize that it feels like there's trauma, but we want to move beyond the trauma. We want to go, hey, I thought I was hurt, but I was confused. I was confused. It's okay. I wasn't hurt because I'm a perfect, divine child of God. Nothing hurts me. Nothing real can be threatened. My soul is what's real, and the body is a thing. The personality is a thing that I'm playing in. And Sabrine says, sometimes people suck your energy just by listening to their problems. Yeah. But, and I was talking about this a little bit earlier, Sabrine. You may have missed it, but I want to say the reason that it feels like they're sucking the energy is because like we're giving it to them. Like people can't just like, they can't, it's kind of like, think about yourself as like a castle and you have a gate up. Like people can't just come in your castle and take your shit. You have to open the gates and invite them to come and take and pillage from you. There is no like, we feel forced, we feel pushed, we feel pressured because we are pressured, we are pushed. The ego pushes us. But ultimately, we put down the bridge. We release the drawbridge and say, hey, come on in and pillage. Take from me. So that you can, you know, go away and then I'll feel peace for a time when you're gone after you've taken from me. But there is, it's our responsibility. You know, it's our responsibility. And it's annoying, isn't it? Isn't that annoying? I thought when we walk past people in a crowded... Jackie H says, I thought when we walk past people in a crowded place can take our energy. No, not really. So your energy is you're an infinite being. You have infinite energy in you. Infinite. The electromagnetic sphere or the electromagnetic field of the earth is the energy you're working with as a being, which is so much vaster than you can really imagine, right? No one's taking anything. However, when you walk by someone, think of two magnets. Like, and even if you do this with your hands, bring them in together really slowly and kind of cycle them together, you're going to feel a almost magnetic type of, in the center of your palms, this magnetic type of feeling. Your aura, yeah, it's going to walk through them, but you're not, you're going to absorb parts of them. Yes, absolutely. Proximity matters in the physical illusion. However, we ascend beyond that too, where I'm all. So what we're actually doing is, like someone said earlier, maybe it was Jackie, talking about the pain of the collective and the consciousness in the collective. We start to realize we are the whole world. This entire planet is what we are. Not just the planet, the sun. We're the light from the sun, and we're the planet birthing itself. So all of it is draining and taking my energy, and right? So it's much bigger than that. And at that individual level, people love to want to say, oh, I'm taking your energy, or they do this and they do. There is no they. Like, that's not real. There is no other person here. There's you and perceiving me, which is you. There's no one to take your energy, another way to say that. No one to disturb the energy, even. There's no one else here. We are the Son of God, and that's it. However, in the physical illusion, when we walk by someone that's got a really shitty energy, and like if we're super sensitive, we're like, whoa, it just feels like I almost got hit by a train. Like, whoa, that was icky. Yeah, that's real. I'm not saying that's not real. I'm just saying it's so much bigger than that. And when we walk by those people and it feels like that, it's because there's a gravity in them pulling them into unconsciousness, usually. Fear, but it's all fear and pain and scare, you know? Riverbank Psycho says, guard your mind. Don't get wrapped up in stuff that will bring your vibration down. Easier said than done, though. Yeah. And if you get wrapped up in it, don't let your emotions get away and do as everyone else is doing, and you're also giving it. Thank you, Supreme. I'm so glad that you understand and are with me on it. You know, none of it is really meant to condemn what we're doing. Like, we're all so funnily ignorant. It's so funny. You know, myself too. All of us, just we're so sure that we know the way. We just don't, and it's okay, right? Oh my God, this is like the longest stream I've done. It's almost 2 hours now, so I think it's time to go. Thank you guys so much. I love you guys so much. Without you guys watching, honestly, I don't know what I would do. So grateful. Thank you guys. Appreciate you. I'll probably be live again tomorrow. I'm not sure what time now, but we'll see. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. If you have any questions or anything like that, and also donations, you guys have been giving me some donations here and there on the PayPal. There's in the description. This allows me to actually keep doing this. I don't like asking for donations, but I do like to say that it's the people that do donate and help really help me be able to keep doing this. Because obviously, I've like I said, I have kids, I have things going on, but I have no other care in the world than to just help people rise. So if you feel called, I appreciate you anyway, regardless. So thank you so much. Take care, everyone.